today we're just going to go over some of the basics in calling, the cluck, honk, and moan. The moan and cluck together make a honk. So we're going to start out with a cluck and then the moan, and we'll go into a honk, and let's just get into it. So I use a short reed goose call. There's things called flutes out there. I'm sure you guys are familiar with flutes. Don't buy those, they're terrible. Buy yourself a short reed goose call. When you're first starting out, you definitely don't need to get an expensive call. All it's doing is giving you more range to do more advanced stuff. So start off with a cheap call. So before we get into the calling, there's a couple terms that I want to define for you guys, just so we're on the same page, and you know what I mean when I say them. So the first word is back pressure. Back pressure refers to the resistance that you get when you blow through your call. There's two ways of causing back pressure. The first way is the bore diameter of your goose call, and the other way is how you hold your call. A lot of people talk about back pressure and how important it is in goose calling, but to me there's a more important word, and that's forward air pressure. So the second word is forward air pressure. This refers to the air that you're forcefully blowing through your call as the back of your tongue is transitioning from the bottom of your mouth to the top of your mouth. Forward air pressure isn't talked about too often in goose calling and how-to videos, and it needs to be talked about more because I think it's probably the most important thing. So the third term is breaking your call over. What this refers to is blowing your call in such a way that the reed inside your goose call snaps. So here's a really dramatic example of breaking the call over. That change in pitch, that's when the reed snaps. So that's what that means. Alright, and then the last term I want to go over with you guys is voice inflection. Voice inflection is just adding voice while you're blowing through the call. You're not saying words. It's more of a growl or a hum type sound, like into the call. Okay, so when you're goose calling, you're blowing hot air through the goose call, but you're also adding voice to that. I don't know if you can see my breath here, but just a really low frequency hum, growl into the call. That's voice inflection. So the first thing I want to go over is some of the technique that goes into goose calling. I'm not going to teach you how to hold the call just yet because we don't want to focus on back pressure. A lot of videos out there show you how to hold the call and create back pressure first, and this creates bad habits because people rely solely on back pressure to break the call over, and the bad thing about this is it limits you in further advanced calls down the road. So we want to focus on forward air pressure. Forward air pressure is what you want to use to break the call over. And so focusing on forward air pressure, you want to have the tip of your tongue planted at the bottom of your bottom teeth. Right where the gums meet your teeth, that's where the tip of your tongue should be planted every time you're calling. So whenever someone asks me for help on how to goose call, the first thing I always do is I have them grab the call just like a glass of water, and I tell them to make a honk or a cluck sound without having their hand down here creating back pressure. If they can't make the call sound like a goose without having back pressure, they're doing goose calling wrong. You should be able to make any goose sound without having your hands at the bottom of the call. So give that a try. Record yourself on your phone. If you don't sound like a goose, you need to focus on getting that forward air pressure to break the call over. And here's how you do that. You just gently blow through the call until you get a little resistance, and then with the back of your tongue, raise it from the bottom of your mouth to the top of your mouth and force the air over your tongue to snap that reed, kind of like this. And it's coming from your diaphragm. You should see my body kind of jolt when I pop that reed over. It's just like that. Moving the middle to back of your tongue and forcing the air over your tongue is what's causing that forward air pressure and the call to break over. You're going to want to master that before we move on to the calling. So if you don't have that mastered, go ahead and pause this video and practice and then come back. So now that you got your forward air pressure down, you're going to want to go ahead and learn how to hold the call. It's different for everyone, but here's how I hold the call. Now I'm right-handed, so I'm going to hold the call with my right hand, obviously. And what I do is I place the call right in the L of my hand in that little webbing. And you want to have the inside of your hand flush with the bottom of the call. And then with your thumb and pointer finger, you just make a ring. Then these three fingers, they just gently cup over like that. Now with my other hand, I usually just match up my fingers together. So pointer with pointer, middle with middle, just like this. It's just it just creates a little dome, and all this is for is changing the direction of where I'm calling. So The moving of your hand, all that's doing is changing the direction of where the call is going. It also helps you sound like more than one goose. You don't want to get too crazy with that in the beginning, but that's what that is for. So the first call that we're going to go over is the cluck. Through the back of the call, it just sounds like. So I'm adding a little voice inflection into that to get a little more goosey tone. Now a lot of people ask, well, what are you saying into the call, or what words do you say to cluck, honk, or anything like that? The truth is you're not using words to make the sound. You're not talking into the call. Reference words just show you how your mouth should be moving in that call. It's a lot more jaw movement than what people think. I move my jaw a ton when I'm goose calling to get the sounds that I want. So you're doing a cluck, it's kind of an it, but of course you want to have the tip of your tongue planted, so more of a it, and you're just forcing the air up with your diaphragm. So the next call we're going to go over is the moan. The moan is one of the few calls that actually doesn't break the reed over, and here's what it sounds like. And through the back of the call it sounds like this. So like I said before, the tip of my tongue is planted at the bottom of my bottom teeth. Watch how my jaw moves when I do the call. It's just blowing a steady stream of air without breaking the call over and using a little voice inflection. It's that easy. So the third and final call we're going to go over today is the honk. The honk is just a combination of the moan finished with a cluck. So it sounds like this. So through the back of the call, this is what it sounds like. And also take note of how my jaw is moving and how my body moves as I force the air through. So once you guys feel comfortable with those three calls, the next step, and probably the most important, is to put them all together into a sequence that sounds like a real goose. So usually when I'm in the field and I'm using the cluck, honk, and moan, what I'm trying to do is imitate geese that are on the ground, feeding and content, and they're seeing other birds work in the area, and they're getting excited or aggressive about it. And it usually sounds something like this. And while you're doing this, you want to make sure that you're reading the birds, making sure that you're not over-calling or under-calling, which I can talk more about in a whole nother video. If you guys are interested, just let me know in the comments. I know when I was first starting out, I recorded myself on my phone hours, and I just keep replaying it to myself until I heard something that I was happy with and I thought sounded enough like a goose. So that's some of my advice there. But really guys, it just takes a ton of practice. I've spent hours just calling. My goose calls are always with me in my truck. And that's a good time to practice when you're in traffic or whatever.